Well, here we go. Trying to find the right angle that would be most complimentary to me, and I finally realized there is no such angle. Um, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the introduction and chapter 1 of What About Evolution? My guess is that some of you probably are getting tired of thinking about what about evolution, although I don't think we've really done too much with it yet, have we? But we've certainly tried to talk about ways to think about scripture that would make room for, I would say, greater confidence in scientific exploration, experimentation theory, and so on. But I do also want to be sensitive to, where you're coming from as you come into this class. I do think this is a nice little book. It's been out just a little over a year now. 3 different authors. One's a theologian, one's a biblical scholar. You may think those are the same thing, but in terms of academic study and academic fields, they're different. They certainly overlap. And then one biologist who used to teach at Point Loma. Now she's actually one of our deans. I am going to have her come in next week. I think I've got her scheduled for Tuesday. So even though we'll be reading the Pastoral Biblical Perspective chapter for next Tuesday, Dr. Cordero will be in on that same day. Let me just make some comments that occurred to me as I kind of look through this again. I'm going to start with the introduction. This would be Roman numeral page 21. That's XXI 21. I think this is this is Telford Work. I believe he's the guy that teaches. Yeah, he teaches at Westmont, whom our volleyball team just beat recently, unbeaten in league games. On that page, first full paragraph, Telford Work, whom I've never met, writes, "We think there is as much room for classic Christian faith in an evolutionary scenario as there is for a Copernican one. A Copernican scenario where the Earth revolves around a sun that slowly circles from the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy." His point being, of course, that Copernican revolution was rather dramatic for Christianity and the church when it finally occurred, and that evolution doesn't really pose any greater challenge or threat than any of the other cosmological shifts that we've undergone, the kinds of things that were discussed in our previous book. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I do think that evolutionary theory probably does make some more significant challenges. I do think that, Christians did have a tough time giving up the idea, not all, but many, most, giving up the idea that the earth wasn't the center of reality, of the universe as they knew it. To think that the sun was a big shift, and that we were revolving around the sun. What happened to us being in the middle of everything? And then later, of course, we realized it's not just a Copernican revolution. It's that our solar system is in this massive galaxy that is one of, numberless galaxies, and all of a sudden we're really displaced from the center, at least cosmologically speaking. But evolution is a whole new kind of challenge. As Telford goes on in this paragraph a little bit later, about halfway down, he says, here too, with the shift in cosmology, not even talking about evolution yet, here too, there are stakes, S-T-A-K-E-S, there's a stake. How is it that the little spinning Earth with its minor league sun Remember, much smaller than Betelgeuse. I know that's not the right pronunciation. With its minor league sun on the fringes of just one of those galaxies, how can it be the center stage of creation's ultimate drama? I think that there are some theological stakes here, and if Telford Work were, in class with us, I'd say, well, what makes you think that the Earth need be the center stage of creation's ultimate drama? Maybe we're taking ourselves a little too seriously there. We don't know what kinds of dramas may be occurring throughout the universe that have a little to nothing to do with us. I think that would require some rethinking of our Christian faith. It certainly doesn't mean disbanding it or abandoning it. But if we begin to think about God as the creator of numberless galaxies, it is a legit question. What then are human beings? The question that was asked in Psalm 8. What then are human beings? We believe that through Jesus Christ, God has undertaken to bring redemption to creation. Then we immediately have to ask, Coco, don't whine. One little bit of creation here, my doggy. She doesn't like my theology. We're not quite sure how expansive to think about that salvation. Does it occur? Does it include other worlds? We can talk about this a different time. But I wanted to highlight that just to assume that our Earth is the center stage of creation's ultimate drama, maybe assuming a bit much. Now, Dr. Cordero, in her Biological Perspective chapter, I'll just make a quick comment on page 3. Again, this is a comment directed toward Telford Work, my fellow theologian. He has a footnote. He's footnoting Dr. Cordero's line, middle of page 3. Science cannot answer such metaphysical questions as whether or not there is a God. I think that's true. Science cannot answer that question. There's a footnote offered by Work, and he writes, "This is not because God is hiding or because God is just a human fabrication, but because of the built-in boundaries of the scientific method." The scientific method, in other words, does not include within its method the question of some spiritual or non-material cause or factor in observation of the world. What makes science's toolkit so powerful in discovering within a range of kinds of knowledge, also limits it beyond that range. I don't disagree, but I think we'd have to be careful when we say it's not because God is hiding. Actually, I think theologically there's a lot of room for saying that God is intentionally, not only is God invisible, but that God is intentionally, we'll use a term like ambiguous. One of my favorite theologians, John Hick, back in the 20th century, way back then, wrote that there is an epistemic distance. Epistemic comes from the word epistemology, which means the philosophy of how we know things. So our capacity to know things. And Hick said that there's an epistemic distance between God and human beings that is part of God's intention, he speculates, in order to give us room, we'll say, as moral agents, to exercise, a measure of responsible freedom. In other words, if God were blatantly obvious, not even as obvious as my dog here, she's really blatantly obvious, but God, in this kind of a theological approach, maintains a kind of humble distance to give us room to grow and to question and to take risks. I think that several of you quoted a line similar to this from Daryl Falk about the mystery that's kind of inherent in our relationship with God, that gives us the freedom to believe this or that, or not to believe that, or to follow some other path altogether. And God isn't forcing us by some kind of obvious display that removes our agency and therefore our responsibility and our capacity for growth through questions, through discovery, through conversation with one another. Indeed, the scientific endeavor is in many ways sort of based in this, as a Christian for me, it's based in this epistemic distance. That is, that God gives us this space, this freedom for exploration, for the natural sciences in our quest to try to understand the world in which we live. I'm going to stop here with this one so it doesn't get too long, but I've got part 2 coming up. Thanks.